The Galactic War College's decision to introduce a mandatory course on understanding human unpredictability sent shockwaves through the interstellar academic community. This unprecedented move came in response to a series of baffling human victories against superior alien forces, leaving the galaxy's most brilliant military minds scrambling for answers. Andrew Griffin, a captured human soldier, found himself at the center of this cosmic controversy. As he was marched through the gleaming halls of the college, his wrists bound by energy cuffs and flanked by towering alien guards, he couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and trepidation. The aliens' desperation to understand human tactics was a testament to humanity's resilience, but it also posed a significant threat to their future survival. The xenobiology department had prepared a specially designed containment cell for Andrew. It was a sterile, white room with transparent walls, allowing the alien researchers to observe him at all times. As the energy field sealed behind him, Andrew surveyed his new surroundings, mind racing with potential escape plans and ways to turn this situation to humanity's advantage. Mizar, a top-ranking Raymond cadet, approached the cell with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. The Raymonds, known for their logical minds and advanced technology, had suffered significant losses to human forces despite their superior weaponry and numbers. This failure grated on their collective psyche, driving them to extreme measures to unravel the mystery of human unpredictability. "Human," Mizar addressed Andrew, his multifaceted eyes gleaming with intensity, "you will be subjected to a series of tests and simulations. Your responses will be analyzed to better understand your species' decision-making processes." Andrew remained silent, his face an impassive mask. He knew that every word, every gesture would be scrutinized. As the experiments began, he found himself thrust into virtual scenarios, facing life-or-death decisions with incomplete information. The Raymonds watched in fascination as he sometimes chose the logical path and other times made seemingly irrational choices that yielded unexpected positive outcomes. As days turned into weeks, Andrew began to grasp the full implications of this course. If the aliens succeeded in decoding human unpredictability, it could spell doom for Earth's forces. With this realization, he started to intentionally vary his responses, sometimes acting with machine-like logic, other times embracing chaos in his decision-making. Mizar grew increasingly frustrated, unable to discern any pattern in Andrew's behavior. The pressure from the Raymond Military High Command only added to the tension, as they demanded results that could turn the tide of the war against humans. Unbeknownst to his captors, Andrew had managed to cobble together a crude communication device from seemingly harmless objects in his cell. In moments of privacy, he tapped out a coded message to human forces, warning them of the potential threat this course posed to their tactical advantages. As Andrew continued to confound his alien observers, human military leaders received his message and sprang into action. They recognized the danger of their enemies learning to predict their strategies and began planning a daring extraction mission. The stage was set for a battle of wits and unpredictability that would shape the future of the galactic conflict. Andrew Griffin, a single human soldier, had become the linchpin in a cosmic struggle between logic and chaos, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. The stark white walls of Andrew's containment cell dissolved into a kaleidoscope of colors as he was transferred to the newly constructed biodome. The transition was jarring, a sudden shift from sterility to a vibrant facsimile of Earth. Andrew's bare feet sank into lush grass, and a simulated breeze ruffled his hair. For a moment he closed his eyes, allowing himself to be transported back home. "Impressive, isn't it?" The voice of Dr. Zix, a Raymond xenobiologist, broke through Andrew's reverie. The alien stood at the edge of the biodome, his iridescent scales reflecting the artificial sunlight. "We've recreated various Earth environments to observe you in your natural habitat." Andrew surveyed his surroundings, taking in the meticulous attention to detail. To his left, a dense forest stretched out, its canopy alive with the chirping of simulated birds. To his right, the skyline of a bustling metropolis rose against the horizon, complete with the distant hum of traffic. "And what exactly am I supposed to do here?" Andrew asked, keeping his tone neutral. Dr. Zix's multifaceted eyes gleamed with excitement. Live, Soldier Griffin. Make decisions. React to the scenarios we present. We aim to understand the essence of human unpredictability. As Dr. Zix explained the purpose of the biodome, Andrew's mind raced. This new environment presented both opportunities and challenges. More freedom meant more chances to mislead his captors, but it also meant more complex situations to navigate. Over the next few days, Andrew found himself thrust into a series of increasingly intricate scenarios. In the urban sector, he faced a simulated hostage situation where he had to negotiate with holographic criminals. Instead of employing standard military tactics, he chose to engage the hostage takers in casual conversation, eventually diffusing the situation through an impromptu joke-telling contest. The Raymond observers, led by Dr. Zix and the ever-present Mizar, watched in bafflement as Andrew's unorthodox approach yielded positive results. Mizar's frustration was palpable, his rigid posture betraying his inner turmoil. This makes no logical sense, Mizar hissed to Dr. Zix. How can humor be an effective negotiation tactic? Dr. Zix's response was measured. That, cadet, is precisely what we're here to understand. As the scenarios escalated, so did Andrew's deliberate efforts to confound his observers. During a simulated natural disaster in the wilderness sector, he chose to sing loudly while building a shelter, claiming it would ward off dangerous animals. The Raymond's confusion only grew when his singing actually seemed to deter holographic predators, a coincidence Andrew leveraged to his advantage. Meanwhile, beyond the walls of the Galactic War College, Major Jack Harper and his team were setting their rescue plan in motion. Sergeant Sarah Baker, her fingers flying over an alien interface, worked tirelessly to breach the college's communication networks. Major, Baker called out, her voice tight with concentration. I've managed to tap into their internal comms. It seems they've moved Griffin to some kind of experimental habitat. Harper leaned over Baker's shoulder, studying the stream of data. Good work, Sergeant. Can you get a layout of this habitat? As Baker worked her technological magic, Corporal Mike Rodriguez returned from his reconnaissance mission. Sir, I've identified a potential entry point. There's a maintenance tunnel that leads directly to the xenobiology department. Security is tight, but with Baker's tech skills, we might be able to loop their cameras. Harper nodded, a plan forming in his mind. Excellent. We'll move tonight. Baker, keep working on those comms. I want eyes and ears inside that habitat before we make our move. Back in the biodome, Andrew found himself facing his most challenging scenario yet. The entire environment had been transformed into a war-torn landscape, reminiscent of the fiercest battles he had faced against the Remans. Holographic enemies swarmed from all directions, their weapons firing harmless but tactilely convincing energy pulses. Andrew's heart raced as he dove for cover behind a crumbling wall. He knew this was a pivotal moment. The Raymans would be expecting him to showcase the same unpredictable brilliance that had led to human victories in real battles. But Andrew had other plans. Instead of fighting, he stood up, hands raised in a gesture of surrender. The holographic enemies flickered, clearly not programmed for this response. In the observation room, Mizar banged his head on the console. "What is he doing?" the Raymond cadet snarled. "This isn't how humans fight!" Dr. Zix leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Perhaps, cadet, that is exactly the point." As the simulated battle dissolved around him, Andrew allowed himself a small, hidden smile. His erratic behavior was working, sowing confusion and frustration among his captors. But he knew he was walking a dangerous line. The Raymond's patience would not last forever, and he could sense Dr. Zix's growing suspicion. Unbeknownst to Andrew, his salvation was drawing near. As night fell over the Galactic War College, Major Harper's team prepared to make their move. Sergeant Baker had successfully infiltrated the biodome systems, giving them a clear view of Andrew's location and the surrounding security measures. "Remember," Harper briefed his team, "our primary objective is extracting Griffin. We get in, we get him, we get out. Any intelligence we can gather on this Understanding Human Unpredictability course is secondary." As the rescue team geared up, Andrew settled into his designated sleeping area in the biodome, his mind racing with possibilities. He had no way of knowing that his liberation was at hand, but years of military training had taught him to always be prepared for the unexpected. In the dim light of the biodome's artificial night, Andrew closed his eyes, but remained alert. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to confound his alien captors. But for now, he waited, a living embodiment of the human unpredictability that so fascinated and frustrated the Raymonds. Outside, under the cover of an alien night, Major Harper's team began their approach to the Galactic War College. The true test of human ingenuity and unpredictability was about to begin. The true test of human ingenuity and unpredictability was about to unfold in ways none of them could have anticipated. As dawn broke over the Galactic War College, a sleek transport vessel touched down on the landing pad. Its doors hissed open, revealing a striking figure, Professor Xandar, the renowned Xyloxian xenopsychologist. Her iridescent scales shimmered in the early morning light as she strode purposefully towards the main building. Dr. Zix and Mizar hurried to greet her, their multifaceted eyes betraying a mix of anticipation and wariness. Professor Xandar, Dr. Zix said, inclining his head respectfully, "We're honored by your presence. I trust your journey was comfortable?" Xandar's silver eyes swept over them, assessing. "Quite," she replied, her voice melodious yet crisp. "Now, I'd like to see the subject immediately. Time is of the essence in these matters." As they led her through the college's winding corridors, Mizar couldn't contain his curiosity. "Professor, if I may ask, what new approach do you intend to take? We've exhausted every logical avenue of study." A small smile played on Xandar's lips. "That, young cadet, is precisely the problem. Logic alone cannot unravel the mystery of human unpredictability. We must engage on a more personal level." They arrived at the biodome's observation room, where Andrew could be seen through the one-way glass, methodically going through a series of calisthenics. Xandar studied him intently, her gaze lingering on the tension in his shoulders, the alertness in his eyes despite the early hour. "I'll need unrestricted access to the subject," she declared. "No observation, no recording devices, just him and me." Dr. Zix's scales rippled with concern. "Professor, with all due respect, that goes against every protocol we've established. The risk of compromising the study is far outweighed by the potential insights we stand to gain," Xandar interrupted smoothly. "Your methods have yielded limited results. It's time for a new approach." Reluctantly, Dr. Zix nodded his assent. Mizar, however, couldn't hide his skepticism. "And what exactly do you hope to achieve through these personal interactions?" Xandar's silver eyes gleamed. "Understanding, cadet. True understanding." Inside the biodome, Andrew tensed as the entry field shimmered, admitting a figure he'd never seen before. The Xyloxian scales caught the artificial sunlight, creating a dazzling display of colors. Despite his wariness, Andrew couldn't help but be intrigued. "Good morning, Soldier Griffin," Xandar said, her voice warm and inviting. "I'm Professor Xandar. I was hoping we might have a chat." Andrew's mind raced, analyzing this new development. A different species, a new approach. This could be an opportunity or a grave threat. He decided to proceed cautiously. "Good morning, Professor. What would you like to chat about?" Xandar settled herself on the grass, gesturing for Andrew to join her. "Oh, anything you'd like. I'm curious about your world, your experiences. Perhaps you could tell me about your hometown?" As Andrew carefully began to describe a heavily edited version of his childhood, he noticed something different about this alien. Unlike the Raymonds, who watched him with clinical detachment, Xandar seemed genuinely interested. Her questions were probing, but not invasive, her manner almost friendly. Over the next few days, Xandar visited Andrew regularly. They talked about Earth's cultures, shared jokes. Andrew was fascinated to learn that Xyloxians had a concept of humor, albeit a very different one, and even played simple games. All the while, Andrew maintained his guard, mixing truth with carefully crafted half-truths and misdirections. In the observation room, Dr. Zix and Mizar watched with growing unease. "This is unprecedented," Mizar muttered, his scales jam-packed. "The subject is engaging more than ever before, but we're gathering no usable data." Dr. Zix's response was measured, but concern tinged his voice. "Patience, Cadet. Professor Xandar's methods are unorthodox, but her results speak for themselves. We must trust the process." As Xandar's sessions with Andrew continued, neither of them realized that events outside the biodome were rapidly unfolding. In the college's lower levels, a figure in a maintenance uniform moved with purposeful stealth. Corporal Rodriguez, his heart pounding beneath his disguise, carefully placed Sergeant Baker's devices at key junctions. "Echo Team, this is Whiskey 1, Rodriguez whispered into his concealed comm unit. "Charges set, awaiting your signal." Major Harper's voice crackled back, tense but controlled. "Understood, Whiskey 1. Get to extraction point Alpha and stand by." As Rodriguez made his way out, Sergeant Baker's fingers flew over her makeshift console. "Major," she said urgently, "I've intercepted some chatter. They're planning to move Griffin soon, possibly within the next 48 hours. Harper's teeth clenched. "Damn, we're not ready. Baker, can you buy us more time?" "I'll try, sir," Baker replied, diving back into the college's communication networks. Back in the biodome, Xandar had initiated a new simulation. The lush grass beneath their feet transformed into cracked pavement, the peaceful sky darkening with roiling clouds. The distant sound of explosions filled the air. "What's happening?" Andrew demanded, his body automatically dropping into a defensive stance. Xandar's voice was calm, but her silver eyes were intent on Andrew's every reaction. "This is a scenario based on reports of human cities under attack. I'm curious to see how you'd respond in such a situation." Andrew's mind raced. He knew this was a test, another attempt to understand human unpredictability. But as the simulation progressed, with civilians crying out for help and alien ships streaking across the sky, something unexpected happened. The line between simulation and memory began to blur. Suddenly, Andrew wasn't in the biodome anymore. He was back on Earth, in the burning ruins of Chicago, watching helplessly as people he'd sworn to protect were cut down by Raymond energy weapons. "No!" he shouted, forgetting himself for a moment. "Fall back to the subway tunnels. We can't hold the surface." Xandar's eyes widened at this outburst. For the first time, she was seeing raw, unfiltered human emotion and decision-making. "Andrew," she said softly, using his first name for the first time, "tell me more. Why the subway tunnels?" In his emotional state, Andrew revealed more than he intended. He spoke of guerrilla tactics, of using the city's infrastructure against the invaders, of the unpredictable advantage humans had in their intimate knowledge of their urban environments. In the observation room, Mizar's scales were practically vibrating with excitement. "Did you hear that?" he exclaimed to Dr. Zix. "We've finally made a breakthrough. I must report this to High Command immediately." As Mizar rushed off, Dr. Zix watched the scene in the biodome with mixed emotions. They had indeed made progress. But at what cost? The Raymond scientist found himself wondering, for the first time, about the ethics of their experiment. Xandar, too, was experiencing an unexpected inner conflict. As she gently guided Andrew back to the present, away from his traumatic memories, she felt a surge of empathy. The human's pain, his passion, his unwavering devotion to his people, it all painted a picture very different from the cold, clinical reports she'd studied. As the simulation faded and the biodome returned to its default state, Andrew and Xandar sat in silence, both lost in thought. Outside, the machinery of two opposing forces, the Raymond military and Major Harper's rescue team, began to move with increasing speed. The Galactic War College had become a powder keg, with Andrew Griffin at its center. As night fell, tensions rose and the stage was set for a clash that would test the limits of human unpredictability against alien logic and power. As night descended on the Galactic War College, the tranquility shattered. Alarms blared, their harsh wails echoing through the corridors. In the observation room, Dr. Zix's multifaceted eyes widened as security feeds flickered and died. "Initiate lockdown protocols," he barked, his scales rippling with agitation. "And bring Griffin to the high-security simulation chamber. Now!" In the biodome, Andrew's head snapped up at the sound of the alarms. His muscles tensed, ready for action. Before he could move, 2 Raymond guards burst in, their energy weapons trained on him. "On your feet, human," one snarled. "You're coming with us." Andrew complied, his mind racing. As they marched him through the chaos-filled hallways, he cataloged every detail, every potential weapon or escape route. Years of training had honed his situational awareness to a razor's edge. Meanwhile, in the bowels of the college, Corporal Rodriguez and his team emerged from a maintenance hatch. The corridor ahead was deserted, emergency lights casting an eerie red glow. "Whiskey 1 to Echo Lead," Rodriguez whispered into his comm. "We're in. Proceeding to objective." Major Harper's voice crackled back, tense but controlled. "Copy, Whiskey 1. Be advised, situation is hot. New intel suggests they're moving Griffin. Adapt and overcome." As Rodriguez's team moved deeper into the facility, Professor Xandar paced in her quarters, her scales shimmering with anxiety. She keyed a sequence into her personal communicator, encrypting the channel. "This is Xandar," she said softly. "The situation has escalated. I repeat, the situation has escalated. Initiate Operation Starburst." Across the city, in a nondescript apartment, a Centaurian with bioluminescent patterns glowing on his skin received the message. His tendrils quivered as he turned to his diverse group of companions. "It's time," he announced. "The GF must act now." Back in the college, Andrew found himself in a stark, white room. Hollow emitters lined the walls, humming with potential energy. Dr. Zix stood at a control panel, his fingers dancing over the interface. "I apologize for the abrupt change in schedule, Soldier Griffin," Zix said, his voice clinically detached. "But recent developments have forced us to accelerate our research." The room shimmered, transforming into a war-torn cityscape. The stench of smoke and the distant rattle of gunfire assaulted Andrew's senses. He stumbled, momentarily disoriented by the sudden shift. "Your earlier responses were most illuminating," Zix continued, his voice echoing from hidden speakers. "Now let's see how you handle a more intense scenario." Simulated civilians materialized around Andrew, their faces contorted in terror. Alien ships screamed overhead, raining destruction. Andrew's training kicked in, and he began shouting orders, directing the civilians to safety. As the simulation progressed, growing more chaotic and challenging, Zix watched with clinical interest. He barely noticed when Mizar burst into the control room, his scales flushed with excitement. "Doctor, you must come quickly," Mizar exclaimed. "A transport has arrived from High Command. Admiral Krovak himself is here." Zix's eyes widened. "The Admiral? Here? But why?" His question was cut short as the building shook, a deep rumble echoing through the structure. Warning lights flashed on the control panel. "Perimeter breach in Sector 7, an automated voice announced. "Security protocols compromised." Outside the college gates, a diverse group of aliens had gathered. They carried signs with slogans like "Freedom for all sentience" and "End unethical experiments." At their head, the Centaurian from the apartment raised his voice, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with passion. "We demand the immediate release of the human known as Andrew Griffin," he shouted. "The Galactic Equality Front will not stand idle while sentient beings are treated as lab specimens." The protest added to the chaos, drawing the attention of security forces and further stretching the college's resources. Unbeknownst to the protesters, their actions were providing crucial cover for Major Harper's team. In the main hangar, a sleek military transport touched down. The hatch opened with a hiss of hydraulics, revealing the imposing figure of Admiral Krovak. His scales were a deep burnished gold, and his eyes gleamed with cold intelligence. "Report!" he barked at the nearest officer. "Sir, we're experiencing multiple security breaches," the officer replied, his voice quavering. "We've lost control of several systems, and there's an unauthorized gathering at the main gates." Krovak's eyes narrowed. "Secure the human test subject and all research data. Lethal force is authorized. I want Griffin and those files on my transport within the hour." As the Admiral's orders sent ripples of activity through the college, Andrew was fighting his own battle in the simulation chamber. The scenarios had grown increasingly grueling, pushing him to his physical and mental limits. Sweat poured down his face as he dragged a simulated wounded soldier to cover. The ground shook with virtual explosions, and the air was thick with holographic smoke. Despite knowing it wasn't real, Andrew's body responded as if the danger was imminent. In a moment of clarity between scenarios, Andrew noticed something odd. The usual hum of the hollow emitters had changed pitch. The simulated environment flickered almost imperceptibly. Realization dawned. The college's systems were compromised. This was his chance. As the next simulation began to materialize around him, Andrew sprinted towards the far wall. He braced himself, expecting to collide with solid matter. Instead, he passed through the faltering hologram and slammed into the control room door. The impact sent shockwaves of pain through his shoulder, but adrenaline dulled the sensation. The door, its electronic lock disabled by the system failures, slid open. Andrew found himself face to face with a stunned Dr. Zix and Mizar. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other in shock. Then Andrew's training took over. He lunged forward, using techniques honed through countless simulations. In seconds, both aliens were incapacitated. Alarms blared anew as Andrew sprinted from the room. He had no plan beyond escape, but years of military experience guided his actions. Find high ground, locate extraction point, evade, and survive. As Andrew navigated the chaotic corridors of the Galactic War College, the various factions converged. Major Harper's team, the GEF protesters, Admiral Krovak's forces, and the college's own security all raced towards a collision course. In the midst of this storm, Professor Xandar made her way to the college's main communication hub. Her fingers flew over the controls, overriding security protocols. Across the facility, screens flickered to life, displaying recorded snippets of her conversations with Andrew. "I miss the sound of rain," Andrew's voice echoed through the college. "The way it drums on the roof, the fresh smell after a storm." "Tell me about your family," Xandar's voice prompted in another clip. "My sister," Andrew replied, his voice thick with emotion. "She's studying to be a doctor, always wanted to help people." As these human moments spread through the college, they began to sow seeds of doubt. Students and staff paused in their activities, struck by the undeniable personhood of the being they had viewed as a test subject. Admiral Krovak, striding purposefully through the halls, sneered as the broadcast reached his ears. "Shut that nonsense off," he ordered. "Find me Griffin and the research data. Nothing else matters." The collision course was set. Andrew, armed with knowledge gleaned from countless simulations, navigated the college with uncanny skill. Major Harper's team closed in, guided by Sergeant Baker's hacked schematics. The GEF protesters pushed against the main gates, their numbers growing, and Admiral Krovak's forces spread through the facility like an invading tide. As the various groups neared the biodome, the heart of the college's simulation technology, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shape the future of human-alien relations. The next few moments would determine not just Andrew's fate, but potentially the course of galactic history. In the biodome's control room, Andrew paused to catch his breath. The familiar hum of simulation technology surrounded him, and a plan began to form in his mind. If he could use the college's own systems against his pursuers. The sound of approaching footsteps spurred him into action. Andrew's fingers flew over the control panel, initiating a sequence that would turn the entire biodome into a labyrinth of ever-changing Earth environments. As the first shouts of discovery reached his ears, he plunged into the shimmering holograms, ready to make his final stand for freedom. Freedom. As Andrew plunged into the shimmering holograms, the biodome erupted into a kaleidoscope of Earth environments. Dense rainforests gave way to scorching deserts, then shifted to snow-capped mountains in the blink of an eye. Andrew's mind raced, drawing on every simulation he'd endured to navigate this ever-changing labyrinth. Behind him, the shouts of Raymond's security grew closer. Andrew ducked under a holographic tree branch, only to find himself ankle-deep in simulated quicksand. He pulled free, his muscles straining, and sprinted across a suddenly materialized Arctic tundra. "Subject Griffin spotted in Sector 3, a voice crackled over the facility's comm system. "All units converge!" Andrew's breath came in ragged gasps as he pushed himself harder. He knew the biodome's layout like the back of his hand, but Dr. Zix's protocols were transforming it into an unpredictable death trap. A chasm opened at his feet, forcing him to leap across. He landed hard, rolling to absorb the impact. As he regained his footing, a familiar voice caught his attention. "Echo 2 to all units. We're inside the facility, moving to extract the package." Hope surged through Andrew. Major Harper's team had made it. He just needed to stay alive long enough to rendezvous with them. Elsewhere in the college, Corporal Rodriguez led his extraction team through the chaos-filled corridors. They moved like ghosts, their advanced stealth tech rendering them nearly invisible to the panicked staff and students. "Contact 2 o'clock, whispered Private Chen, raising her pulse rifle. 2 Raymond guards rounded the corner. Weapons at the ready, Rodriguez signaled his team to hold position. As the guards passed, oblivious to the human presence, Rodriguez struck. In a blur of motion, both aliens were unconscious before they hit the ground. "Damn," muttered Specialist Osaka, securing the Raymond's weapons. "They really don't know what hit them." Rodriguez allowed himself a grim smile. "Let's keep it that way. Move out." Meanwhile, Sergeant Baker and her team had reached the central data hub. The room hummed with banks of alien computers, streams of data flowing across holographic displays. "Jackpot," Baker muttered, her fingers flying over an interface. "All right, team, let's corrupt this data and get out of here." As she worked, a flashing alert caught her eye. "Shit, they're already transmitting the research off-world." Baker's mind raced, formulating a new plan. Change of objective. We're going to feed them false information. Make them think they've cracked the code on human unpredictability. Her team set to work, implanting subtle errors and misdirections into the outgoing data stream. With luck, it would take the Raymonds years to realize they'd been duped. In the command center, Admiral Kovacs snarled in frustration. Holographic displays showed the college descending into chaos. Red alert indicators flashed everywhere. "How hard can it be to capture one human?" he roared, slamming a scaled fist on the console. "I want every available unit converging on the biodome, now!" A junior officer approached, his scales pale with anxiety. "Sir, we're receiving reports of a human attack on Outpost Zeta 9. Krovak's eyes narrowed. "A diversion. Clever, but futile." He turned to his second-in-command. "Redirect our orbital defenses to counter the attack. I'll deal with this mess personally." As the Admiral stormed out, Professor Xandar's broadcast continued to sow discord throughout the college. In the cafeteria, a group of Centaurian students formed a blockade, preventing security forces from passing. "We won't let you harm him," one shouted, his bioluminescent patterns flashing defiantly. Outside, the situation was escalating rapidly. The GEF protesters, led by the fiery Zara, had breached the main gates. They flooded onto the campus, their diverse alien forms a stark contrast to the uniformed Raymond security. "Freedom for all sentience," Zara's voice boomed through a megaphone. "End the unethical experiments now." The influx of protesters added to the bedlam, stretching the already overwhelmed security forces to their breaking point. In the confusion, Major Harper's team found their path to the biodome clearing. Back in the simulated wilderness, Andrew was running out of options. The environments were shifting faster now, each change bringing new dangers. He narrowly avoided a simulated lava flow, only to find himself facing a pack of holographic wolves. Just as he prepared to make a desperate run, a section of the wall shimmered and disappeared. Corporal Rodriguez stepped through, his stealth field dissipating. "Soldier Griffin, time to go home, sir." Andrew didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted towards the extraction team, relief flooding through him. But as he reached them, alarms blared. The biodome's main doors slid open, revealing Admiral Krovac and a squad of elite Raymond shock troops. "Surrender the human," Krovac demanded, his voice cold and sharp, "or face annihilation." Rodriguez's team formed a protective circle around Andrew, weapons raised. The air crackled with tension as both sides faced off, neither willing to back down. In that moment of standoff, Mazar appeared from a side entrance, his eyes wild with a mix of fear and excitement. "Wait," he shouted. "I can predict what the human will do next." All eyes turned to the young Raymond scientist, his unexpected arrival adding yet another layer of unpredictability to the already volatile situation. As Mizar stepped forward, his gaze locked on Andrew, the fate of the human soldier and the future of interspecies relations hung in the balance. The biodome, once a controlled environment for studying human behavior, had become ground zero for a conflict that would reshape the galaxy. And as the various factions converged, human, Raymond, and those caught in between, the true test of adaptability and unpredictability was about to begin. Mizar's unexpected arrival shattered the tense standoff. His eyes darted between Andrew and Admiral Krovac, his scales rippling with nervous energy. Before anyone could react, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Neural disruptors. Andrew's combat-honed instincts kicked in. "Down!" he shouted, diving for cover as a specialized Raymond capture squad materialized from hidden alcoves. The air crackled with energy as neural pulses lashed out, dropping two of Rodriguez's team before they could react. Rodriguez cursed, returning fire. "Griffin, we need an exit!" Andrew's mind raced, recalling every detail of the biodome systems. He spotted a control panel near his position and made a split-second decision. "Cover me!" As Rodriguez and the remaining team members laid down suppressing fire, Andrew lunged for the panel. His fingers flew over the alien interface, muscle memory from countless simulations guiding his actions. With a triumphant beep, the emergency ventilation protocol activated. Dense fog billowed from hidden vents, rapidly filling the biodome. Visibility plummeted to near zero. The Raymond squad's shouts of confusion mingled with Admiral Krovac's enraged roar. "Move!" Andrew hissed, grabbing Rodriguez's arm. They stumbled through the fog, using the sounds of Raymond chaos to orient themselves away from danger. Elsewhere in the college, Sergeant Baker sprinted through corridors littered with debris from the ongoing riots. Her successful sabotage of the research data transmission had been a critical blow, but she knew the mission wasn't over until Andrew was safely extracted. As she rounded a corner, Baker skidded to a halt. Dr. Zix stood before her, his usually immaculate lab coat disheveled, eyes wild with desperation. "You!" he snarled, recognizing her human features. "Where is Subject Griffin?" Baker's hand inched towards her sidearm. "Sorry, Doc, client confidentiality." Dr. Zix lunged for a nearby control panel. "I will not let you ruin years of research." Baker was faster. She slammed her palm onto her wrist computer, unleashing a targeted electromagnetic pulse. The corridor's systems flickered, then came under her control. Dr. Zix's eyes widened in shock as the simulated environments he had painstakingly designed turned against him. Holographic vines erupted from the walls, ensnaring the Raymond scientist. Baker allowed herself a grim smile before continuing her sprint towards the extraction point. The main gates of the Galactic War College buckled under the combined assault of GEF protesters and sympathetic students. Zara, her voice hoarse from shouting, led the charge into the inner sanctum. "This way!" a Centaurian student called out, gesturing towards an unmarked door. "There are others like your human friend." Zara nodded, directing a group of protesters to follow. They burst into the xenobiology department, confronted by rows of containment units. Alien test subjects of various species gazed out with a mix of hope and fear. "Get them out!" Zara ordered, her hands already working to decipher the locking mechanism on the nearest unit. One by one, the subjects were freed, adding their voices to the growing cacophony of the riot. A Vexillion, its crystalline form glittering under the emergency lights, approached Zara. "Thank you," it chimed. "How can we help?" Zara's eyes gleamed with grit. "Spread the word. Today, we end this injustice." As the riots intensified, Mizar found himself separated from the main conflict. His pursuit of Andrew had led him into an unused section of the college. The young Raymond scientist's hearts raced as he realized where he was. A hidden communication center, its existence known only to the highest-ranking officials. Curiosity overcame caution. Mizar approached the main console, his fingers dancing over the controls. Intercepted messages flashed across the screen, his eyes widening as he deciphered their contents. The human attack on Outpost Zeta-9 was a diversion. A much larger offensive was underway, targeting key Raymond strongholds across the sector. Mizar's breath caught in his throat. This information could turn the tide of the entire conflict. His hand hovered over the alert button. Duty demanded he report this immediately, yet doubt gnawed at him. The data on human unpredictability, the ethical concerns raised by the protesters, Andrew's undeniable personhood, it all swirled in his mind, paralyzing him with indecision. In the command center, Admiral Krovak's fury had reached its boiling point. Holographic displays showed the college in complete disarray. The human subject was still at large, protesters ran rampant, and now reports of attacks on Raymond outposts flooded in. "Enough!" Krovak roared, smacking his palm onto the central console. "Initiate Protocol Omega Black." His second-in-command paled. "Sir, the self-destruct sequence? But the civilian casualties—" Krovak silenced him with a glare. "Better to lose the college than allow our research to fall into enemy hands. Do it. Now." Alarms blared throughout the facility as the self-destruct sequence engaged. Panic spread like wildfire among students and staff. Krovak allowed himself a grim smile. Let the humans try to survive this. Professor Xandar, monitoring the situation from her office, felt her blood run cold as the self-destruct alert flashed across her screen. Her fingers flew across her console, bypassing security protocols she had long ago memorized. "Not today, Admiral," she muttered, initiating a lockdown of the college's central reactor. The self-destruct sequence stuttered, then paused. Xandar knew it was only temporary, but it might buy enough time for evacuation or intervention. As chaos engulfed the college, a new faction emerged from the shadows. A group of alien students, inspired by Andrew's resilience and the message of the GEF protesters, began a coordinated campaign of sabotage against Raymond equipment. Lyrel, a Thracian engineering student, led a team in disabling security cameras and locking down key access points. "For too long we've been complicit," she chittered to her companions. "No more. Today we choose a side." Across the college, similar scenes played out. Students used their intimate knowledge of the facility to undermine Raymond control, providing crucial assistance to the human rescue team and the escaped test subjects. Andrew, separated from Rodriguez during the neural disruptor ambush, found himself in an unfamiliar section of the college. The signs on the wall identified it as the high-security archives. His military training screamed at him to regroup with his team, but a nagging instinct told him to investigate. Slipping into the archive room, Andrew's eyes widened at the rows of data storage units. He approached a terminal, thankful for the countless hours spent learning Riemann computer systems during his captivity. As file after file flashed across the screen, Andrew's blood ran cold. The Riemann's research into human behavior went far beyond simple military applications. He found detailed plans for large-scale psychological warfare against Earth, strategies to manipulate human societies, and worst of all, a timetable for implementation. "I have to warn them," Andrew muttered, frantically searching for a way to transmit the data. The fate of humanity might well rest on getting this information out. Outside the college's perimeter, Major Harper monitored the deteriorating situation with growing concern. The extraction plan had gone sideways from the start, and now with the self-destruct sequence activated, time was running out. "Sir," Specialist Osaka's voice crackled over the comm. "I've got a lock on the college's teleportation grid. It's heavily encrypted, but I think I can breach it." Harper's mind raced, weighing the risks. Using the Raymond's own teleportation technology was dangerous, but it might be their only shot at getting everyone out alive. "Do it," he ordered. "Initiate Protocol Omega. All teams, prepare for emergency extraction on my mark." As Osaka worked to breach the teleportation systems, Harper opened a channel to all human operatives inside the college. "Listen up, people. We've got one shot at this. Get to your designated extraction points and stand by. And someone find Griffin. We are not leaving without him." Inside the college, the various factions converged on the central reactor. The human rescue team fought to regroup. GEF protesters struggled to protect the freed test subjects, and Admiral Krovak's final reserves pushed to regain control. The reactor chamber itself became a battleground, with Raymond's security forces exchanging fire with human operatives and alien resistance fighters. The air crackled with energy weapons and the acrid smell of ozone. Above it all, the self-destruct sequence resumed its ominous countdown. The fate of the Galactic War College, and perhaps the future of human-alien relations, hung in the balance. As the chaos reached its peak, the stage was set for a final, climactic confrontation that would test the limits of human adaptability against the full might of Raymond military doctrine. Andrew, his arms full of stolen data drives, raced towards the sounds of battle, knowing that his next actions could change the course of galactic history. The true test of human unpredictability was about to unfold. The reactor chamber erupted into chaos as the factions collided. Energy weapons crackled, filling the air with the acrid scent of ozone. Andrew, his arms laden with stolen data drives, sprinted towards the sounds of battle. His heart pounded, each step carrying the weight of potentially galaxy-altering information. A nearby explosion rocked the corridor, showering Andrew with debris. He stumbled, regaining his footing just as a squad of Raymond soldiers rounded the corner, their scaled faces twisted in recognition. "Subject Griffin, halt!" the lead soldier barked, raising his weapon. Andrew dove behind a fallen support beam, the stolen drives clutched tightly to his chest. Neural disruptor pulses sizzled overhead, leaving scorch marks on the wall behind him. He needed a way out fast. As if in answer to his silent plea, a hidden panel in the wall slid open. Professor Xandar's voice crackled through a nearby speaker. "This way, Andrew, hurry!" Without hesitation, Andrew rolled into the opening, the panel ceiling shut behind him, just as the Raymond soldiers reached his former position. He found himself in a narrow maintenance tunnel, emergency lights casting an eerie glow on the metal walls. "Head north," Xandar instructed. "There's a secure transmission point in the old xenobiology lab. I'll guide you through the safest route." Andrew nodded, though he knew the professor couldn't see him. He set off at a steady jog, the weight of the data drives a constant reminder of his mission's importance. Meanwhile, in the central reactor chamber, Sergeant Baker's fingers flew over the control panel. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked to stabilize the increasingly unstable core. "Damn it," she muttered, eyes scanning the readouts. The self-destruct sequence was far more complex than initially thought. "Major Harper, come in!" "Go ahead, Baker," Harper's voice crackled through her comm. "Sir, we've got a problem. The self-destruct can't be stopped from here. There are manual overrides scattered throughout the facility. We need to hit them all to buy enough time for evac." There was a moment of tense silence before Harper responded. "Understood. I'm redirecting teams now. Hold your position and do what you can to slow that countdown." Baker acknowledged the order, her mind racing. She'd need to get creative to keep this reactor from going critical. Across the college, the human rescue teams found themselves in a deadly game of cat and mouse. Lieutenant Rodriguez led his squad through the winding corridors, using the college's own ventilation systems to outmaneuver Raymond patrols. "Contact! 3 o'clock!" Specialist Chen called out. Rodriguez spun, his weapon raised. A group of Raymond elite guards had just entered the intersection ahead. Time seemed to slow as both sides registered each other's presence. Then all hell broke loose. Energy bolts filled the air as both sides dove for cover. Rodriguez's team had the advantage of position, but the Raymonds had numbers. The lieutenant knew they couldn't afford a prolonged engagement. Chen, Torres suppressing fire. Everyone else, fall back to Point Charlie. As his team executed the maneuver, Rodriguez caught sight of an environmental control panel. A plan formed in his mind. Chen, cover me! Rodriguez sprinted to the panel, dodging enemy fire. His fingers danced over the alien interface, muscle memory from countless simulations guiding his actions. With a triumphant beep, the corridor's atmospheric controls shifted. Thick, choking fog poured from the vents, obscuring vision and confusing the Raymond's thermal sensors. In the ensuing chaos, Rodriguez's team slipped away, one step closer to their extraction point. In the college's main atrium, Zara led her growing band of protesters and liberated test subjects. They had just freed a group of Xyloxian captives, the crystalline aliens adding their unique abilities to the group's arsenal. The administration block is just ahead, Zara called out, her voice hoarse from shouting. Once we secure it, we can... Her words were cut off by a deafening explosion. The floor beneath them shuddered, cracks spiderwebbing across the polished surface. What was that? A Centaurian student asked, fear evident in their multifaceted eyes. Zara's expression hardened. Krovak, he's destroying the evidence. We need to move, now. As they pressed forward, they encountered less resistance than expected. Many of the Raymond security forces had been drawn away by Mizar's clever diversion. The young scientist's internal struggle had finally persevered into action, his knowledge of Raymond protocols proving invaluable. Mizar himself now found his way blocked by a pack of lab-grown predators, released when the biodome's containment systems failed. The reptilian creatures stalked towards him, their forked tongues tasting the air. Just as the lead creature tensed to pounce, a barrage of energy bolts dropped it mid-leap. Mizar turned to see a group of alien students, led by a Thracian he recognized from his xenobiology class. Laurel? He asked, confusion evident in his voice. The Thracian's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. Looks like you could use some help, Professor. Before Mazar could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Major Harper's voice echoed over the college-wide communication system. Attention, all personnel. This is Major Harper of the Human Expeditionary Force. The college's defensive shields will be dropping in exactly 10 minutes. This will be your only window for evacuation. Proceed immediately to designated extraction points. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. The announcement sent a fresh wave of panic through the college's remaining occupants. In the old xenobiology lab, Andrew finally reached the secure transmission point. He connected the stolen data drives, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he initiated the upload. A progress bar appeared on the screen, crawling forward at an agonizingly slow pace. Andrew's eyes hardened as he realized the Raymonds were using powerful jamming technology to slow the transmission. Come on, he muttered, watching the percentage tick up one agonizing point at a time. The sound of approaching footsteps made Andrew's blood run cold. He drew his sidearm, preparing to defend his position. The fate of humanity might well rest on the successful transmission of this data. As the college continued to crumble around them, the scattered human rescue team members fought their way towards their assigned extraction points. They were aided by an unlikely coalition, GEF protesters, alien students, and even a handful of defecting Raymond personnel. The once pristine halls of the Galactic War College had become a war zone. Energy weapons fire lit up the smoky air, punctuated by the roars of escaped alien creatures and the groans of failing infrastructure. In the reactor chamber, Sergeant Baker worked feverishly to delay the inevitable. She had managed to extend the countdown, but it was a temporary measure at best. The reactor's core temperature continued to rise, edging ever closer to critical mass. As Andrew defended his position against waves of Raymond soldiers, The data transfer inched towards completion. The college shuddered around him, chunks of ceiling raining down as the structural integrity failed. He knew that every second he bought increased the chances of this crucial intelligence reaching human hands. With the extraction window rapidly approaching and the college on the brink of destruction, the success of the mission hung by a thread. The human rescue team raced against time, fighting to secure Andrew, complete the data transmission, and reach the extraction points before the college's imminent collapse. The fate of not only those within the college walls, but potentially the entire human-alien conflict rested on the outcome of this chaotic, multifaceted battle. As the final minutes ticked away, the true test of human adaptability was about to reach its climax. Climactic moment. The college trembled, a foreboding rumble echoing through its corridors. Andrew's fingers flew over the alien keyboard, his eyes darting between the progress bar and the doorway. The data upload crawled forward at an agonizingly slow pace. A barrage of neural disruptor fire peppered the wall beside him. Andrew ducked, returning fire with his sidearm. The acrid smell of ozone filled the air as energy bolts sizzled past. "Hold your position!" Corporal Rodriguez's voice rang out as he and his team burst into the room. They took up defensive positions, laying down suppressing fire against the advancing Raymond soldiers. Andrew nodded gratefully, turning his attention back to the data transfer. Come on, he muttered, watching the percentage tick up. Suddenly, the entire structure shook violently. A deafening explosion tore through the college, the shock wave knocking everyone off their feet. Alarms blared as emergency force fields flickered to life, struggling against the sudden exposure to the alien atmosphere. "What the hell was that?" Rodriguez shouted, helping Andrew to his feet. Before anyone could respond, Professor Xandar's voice crackled over the comm system. "The environmental generator in Biodome 3 just overloaded. We've got a massive breach in the outer hull. Emergency force fields are failing." Andrew's eyes widened as he saw cracks spiderwebbing across the ceiling. "We need to move! Now!" As if in response to his words, a fresh wave of Raymond soldiers poured into the room. The human team found themselves pinned down, exchanging fire from behind hastily assembled barricades. In the reactor chamber, Sergeant Baker's hands flew over the controls, her face a mask of concentration. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked to counteract Admiral Krovak's manual override of the self-destruct sequence. "Major Harper," she called into her comm, "Krovak's accelerated the countdown. I'm doing everything I can, but we're running out of time." Harper's voice came back, tense but controlled. "Understood, Sergeant. Hold that reactor as long as you can. All teams converge on Andrew's position in the xenobiology lab. That's our extraction point. Move." Throughout the crumbling college, the scattered human operatives fought their way towards the new rendezvous. Professor Xandar's voice guided them through the chaos, her intimate knowledge of the facility proving invaluable. "Take the service tunnel on your left," she instructed a group led by Specialist Osaka. "It'll bypass the collapsed section in the main corridor." As they rounded a corner, they nearly collided with Mizar. The young Raymond scientist raised his hands in surrender, his eyes wild with fear and drive. "Wait," he called out. "I want to help. I know a faster way to the xenobiology lab." Osaka hesitated, her weapon trained on Mizar. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "Lead the way, but no funny business." Outside the college, chaos reigned. The GEF protesters, led by the indomitable Zara, had managed to secure a handful of transport shuttles. They worked feverishly to evacuate as many freed test subjects and defecting alien students as possible. Energy bolts from the college's automated defense systems lit up the sky around them. Zara gritted her teeth, executing a series of evasive maneuvers that would have made a seasoned pilot proud. "Hang on!" she shouted to her passengers as she banked hard, narrowly avoiding a barrage of fire. The diversionary tactic worked, drawing attention away from the human rescue operation within the college. Back in the xenobiology lab, Andrew and Rodriguez's team found themselves in an increasingly desperate situation. The Raymond forces were closing in, and the data transfer seemed to have stalled completely. Suddenly, a strange chittering sound filled the air. The human defenders watched in amazement as a wave of alien creatures flooded into the room. Escaped specimens from the biodome, driven to frenzy by the chaos, attacked Raymond and human alike. Among the creatures, a tentacled being resembling an earth octopus displayed remarkable intelligence. It slithered past the battling forces, its appendages wrapping around the computer terminal where Andrew had initiated the upload. "What the—" Andrew started, but his words died in his throat as he watched the creature's tentacles dance across the interface with impossible speed and precision. The progress bar on the screen lurched forward, racing towards completion. In a matter of seconds, the upload finished, the terminal chiming its success. "It's done!" Andrew shouted, grabbing the data drives. "Let's move!" As they fought their way out of the lab, they were joined by Sergeant Baker, her face streaked with sweat and grime. "The reactor's going critical," she reported grimly. "We've got minutes. Tops." The college shuddered around them, entire sections beginning to collapse into the alien landscape below. The air grew thin as the emergency force fields faltered, struggling to hold back the hostile atmosphere. Professor Xandar's voice, now strained with static, guided the converging groups towards the extraction point. Human operatives, alien allies, and a handful of defecting Raymond personnel battled through the chaos. As they neared their destination, a massive section of ceiling came crashing down, nearly crushing Corporal Rodriguez. A scaled hand grabbed him, pulling him to safety at the last second. Rodriguez looked up to see Mazar, the Raymond scientist, nodding grimly before pushing forward. The final seconds ticked away as the group reached the extraction point. Major Harper's voice crackled over the comm system. "Stand by for teleportation. This is going to be close." Energy began to crackle around them, the air shimmering with the building power of the teleportation device. Through the windows, they could see the reactor core glowing an ominous, pulsating red. Just as the college began to tear itself apart, a blinding flash of light engulfed the group. The world around them dissolved into pure energy, scattering them across space in a desperate bid for survival. Aboard the hidden orbital ship, Andrew materialized alongside Major Harper and the core rescue team. They rushed to their stations, breaking orbit as the Galactic War College erupted in a spectacular explosion below them. The shock wave rocked their ship, alarms blaring as systems struggled to compensate. Through the view screen, they watched as nearby Raymond vessels tumbled out of formation, disabled by the blast. "Punch it!" Harper ordered, and their pilot complied. The stars stretched into lines as the ship leapt into faster-than-light travel, leaving the devastation behind. As the adrenaline of their narrow escape began to fade, Andrew slumped into a chair, the weight of the data drives heavy in his hands. He looked around at the battered, exhausted faces of his teammates, a mix of relief and uncertainty in their eyes. Major Harper approached, placing a hand on Andrew's shoulder. "You did it, son. That intel you're holding might just turn the tide of this war." Andrew nodded, his mind already racing with the implications of what they'd accomplished, and the challenges that lay ahead. As the ship hurtled through space towards their rendezvous point, he couldn't help but wonder how this experience would reshape the galaxy they'd left behind. The rescue team had survived, but they were scattered. The college was destroyed, but its secrets were now in human hands. And somewhere out there, a new coalition was forming, one that might forever change the balance of power in the galaxy. As Andrew stared out at the streaking stars, he knew that their mission wasn't over. It was, in many ways, just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.